most of the films of war cinema, we see that there are two predominant moments when it comes to capturing the experience of the soldier in war. One moment is the calm or rest, and the other moment is combat. To these two moments we could add a third, which is the prelude where tension builds up before exploding into action. 1917 is not exactly an exception to the rule, but the fact of using a single sequence shot gives the feeling that they are not isolated moments, but that they are elements that are in total harmony. Time is the enemy. This is the slogan of the film, and whether it was on purpose or not, it is a meta reference. Since time is not only the antagonist of Blake and Schofield, time was also the challenge for the filmmakers in making this film. But above all, the notion of time of 1917 is the main dish served to the viewer, because uninterrupted action takes away the opportunity to reflect on the past or the future. We are trapped in the present. This is where the concept of the eternal present appears. And to understand how this result is so effective, let's review the production process and narration of the film, the inspirations of director Sam Mendes, and some elements of the war experience. So a spoiler alert is well deserved because today we're going to analyze 1917.
I think each movie hopefully you make is a sort of, a summation of what you've done before.
After the success of his feature film debut with American Beauty, Sam Mendes had the opportunity to direct a franchise as iconic as James Bond. In Spectre, the uninterrupted shot of the beginning was for Mendes a first experience of what would come 4 years later with 1917. Likewise, we could take as another antecedent Jarhead, his first war film released in 2005. Sam Mendes stated on multiple occasions that the idea for 1917 came from his grandfather Alfred Hubert Mendes, who was a British soldier and messenger in the First World War. One of his stories about carrying a message across no man's land served as a basis for Sam Mendes and Christy Wilson to write the script for this film. 1917 is located in the main scene of the First World War, the Western Front, specifically in the north of France. The Germans opened this front by invading Luxembourg and Belgium. Both sides dug trenches along this line from the North Sea to Switzerland. We follow the story of two British soldiers, Corporal William Schofield and Corporal Tom Blake. Thanks to the area of reconnaissance, General Erin is aware that the Germans have strategically retreated their troops to form a new line that will ambush the battalion led by Colonel Mackenzie, a total of 1,600 soldiers, including Blake's older brother. Since the Germans cut the telephone lines, there is no choice but to carry the message on foot. Blake and Schofield managed to go through a no man's land full of corpses and reach the German trenches to verify that the enemy has indeed abandoned their post. Investigating the rooms, they are the victim of an explosion after a rat triggered a trap left by the Germans. They narrowly manage to get out, and they argue about continuing going forward or not. But finally, they decide not to turn back by firing the flare as a signal that they managed to pass the German trench. Blake and Schofield arrive at that abandoned property where a German plane falls after losing a confrontation against two Allied planes. The pilot survives and Schofield wants to end his life, but Blake decides to help him, which seals his death sentence.
I'll give them the message. And then I'll find your brother. Just like you. A little older.
Now it's only Schofield who must fulfill the mission and his promise while facing the grief of having lost a friend. A British unit passing on the road picks Schofield up and drops him close to the devastated village of Icust-Thomas, as vehicles cannot pass over the destroyed bridge. Schofield crosses the bridge, but is attacked by a sniper, whom he managed to injure but not kill yet. Schofield regains consciousness while the town is being burned and flees as best he can from the Germans. He strangles one of them and loses his rifle on the way, but manages to escape by jumping into the river. At the end of the river, he meets the second wave of Blake's brother's battalion. Now that he knows that Colonel Mackenzie is close, he makes his way through hundreds of soldiers. Seeing that the attack has already started and that he has no more time, he exposes his life by running in the middle of the battlefield. He manages to get to Colonel Mackenzie and convinces him to read the letter. Finally, the attack is cancelled, and we are left with one of the most memorable phrases of the film.
Hope is a dangerous thing.
After the climax, Schofield searches among seriously injured soldiers for Blake's brother, who is thankfully alive and whole. Schofield informs him of Tom's death and comforts him by telling him that his brother was a good man. He finds a tree where he can assimilate and rest from all that he has just experienced. Sam Mendes mentions that his intention in making the film in this way is for the viewer to feel that it is a journey from which you cannot escape, just like the characters. Having reviewed the argument, let's put the items on the table. We are faced with the mission of delivering a message to another battalion. We have the responsibility of saving hundreds of lives, including that of a relative, so there is no option to surrender. There is a goal to be reached within a deadline that approaches every second. The journey is long, and what makes the situation more critical is that you don't know when you're going to be shot or bombed. Calm and security are extremely unstable. These elements together is what builds in the viewer a feeling of anxiety, which put us in the same mental state as soldiers. What many do not consider is that anxiety is a defense mechanism, since it appears when there is a threat. With anxiety, the heart beats faster, the muscles tense, the reaction response is also faster, and we shift to an alert state. This is absolutely crucial in a war zone. Anxiety is a synonym for fear, one of the most basic human emotions that has allowed our survival as a species. Of course, these emotional effects on the viewer would not have been achieved without the enormous production work behind it. Making a war film in itself has its complexity, but adding the one-shot element required the filmmakers to overcome challenges that serve as a masterclass of problem-solving when making movies. 1917 is not the first film to use the one-take concept. With 1948's Rope, Alfred Hitchcock takes credit for being the first to consolidate this one-take idea. And like 1917, it's not really a single uninterrupted take. Rather, they are several long takes joined and edited to look like one, although it's clear that 1917 required much more special effects to achieve its goal. Given that a long shot requires more preparation, the key was in the planning. They had to plan the route of the camera, the movements it was going to follow, how they were going to move it, and adapt the scenery for a fluid journey. The production team built mock-ups of each set. This served to calculate the exact distances and times to be followed. The scenes had to be as long as the length of the ground. Something interesting about this is that if a 5-minute scene where the characters have to get from A to B, they literally have to manage to get there in 5 minutes. The rehearsals were then another key element. The actors had to rehearse their lines in the location itself, to synchronize their dialogues with the movements they had to follow.
You swapped it?
Mm-hmm.
For what?
Bottle of wine.
The scenography mock-ups were also used for lighting tests and determining the movements of the lights. Roger Deakins, cinematography director, mentioned that being a movie where almost all the action takes place outdoors, they had to rely mostly on natural lighting. The constant 360-degree camera rotation gave greater flexibility for filming, but made it virtually impossible to position the lighting equipment. It was filmed only when the weather was cloudy, which inevitably caused delays. However, this was totally necessary, since to maintain a story in the present moment, you have to follow a continuity. About the trenches, it was built more than a mile from them for the film, with considerable attention paid to each element.
As an actor, it really helps you just get lost in the scene.
The great difference in resources and preparation between both sides was reconstructed. The German trenches featured concrete walls, sandbags that neatly completed the walls, and had large capacity bedrooms, whereas the British trenches had walls built in a much more rustic way, made of wood, corrugated iron, wire and sandbags that did not complete the walls. The soldiers in this site practically slept in any free place they found. And speaking of the soldiers, the viewer can easily empathize with this duo, not only because of the harsh context in which they find themselves, but also because we are equally involved with the goal of completing the mission on time. Another factor that facilitates this connection between character and viewer is the fact that these actors chosen as the main soldiers are credible and contribute to the realism of the film. Beyond acting performance, Sam Mendes was very clear about what he was looking for to embody Blake and Schofield. He totally avoided any superstars and focused on actors who were practically unknown, since he wanted them to be seen as an average soldier, without anything outstanding, as a soldier among the millions who lost their lives in combat and that little is known about their stories. In the same way, it was essential that they were very young, since the average age of British soldiers was quite low due to the fact that many under 18s lied about their age. Simultaneously, the cast includes well-known British actors such as Colin Firth and Benedict Cumberbatch. Perhaps Mendes wanted to further mark the difference between a simple soldier who is sent to die, about whom little is known, and a high command who will likely be mentioned in the history books and who enjoys greater security by staying in the barracks.
We should at least wait until it's dark. Erinmore said to leave immediately. Erinmore's never seen no man's land.
And another resource to contribute to realism is having presented Blake as the main protagonist at the beginning of the story. In the time that Blake was alive, he was the one who carried most of the action, while Schofield followed. The viewer is introduced to the idea that Blake is the hero of the story until he dies suddenly. This twist makes us realize once again that no one is special in the battle zone, and that everyone is mere mortals. To finish with the notion of the eternal present, it is necessary to talk about the relationship that this film has with the theater. Sam Mendes, like Hitchcock with Rope, felt the need for 1917 to be like a theater play. The actors had to rehearse each dialogue in the stage, since as in the theater, the space is built based on the rhythm of the script. The very experience of filming 1917 is similar to performing a play. When it begins, you cannot stop until the scene ends, regardless of mistakes. That's why the notion of the eternal present is a widely used concept among theater actors. It is a synonym of the here and now, which demands all the concentration of the person, who should not pay attention to anything that is not related to what is happening, since the action doesn't stop until everything is over. And we see this directly in 1917, with the experience of the soldiers on the battlefield, and with the experience of us as spectators. And that's all for today. If you like it, don't forget to subscribe and share this content to support it. Thank you very much for watching.